And now to round out our discussion on the financial aspects of risk and hazards, we're happy to have with us Mr. Jalen Gildersleeve, an ecosystem developer at the prestigious Buckminster Fuller Institute, who's going to talk about the interconnectedness of finance, biodiversity, and impact. Jalen?
What an amazing series of brilliant speakers. Let's give them another round of applause. I am obviously not a geographer or even a scientist, but I'm deeply impressed by the amazing work and amazing revelations I've been able to have from seeing world-class geographers. And of course, seeing institutions like the American Geographic Society being 172 years old and really stewarding this work. Today, this will be a slightly different talk, comparatively. Since I'm not a scientist and I'm sadly just an investor and an AI engineer, I mostly spend most of my time looking at startups and doing boring stuff around that. But when I'm not doing that, I get to steward great work that I do with the Buckminster Fuller Institute. And they have a very unique lens that overlaps and intersects with a lot of the great things that we have seen today. But I'll look at it from the lens of how it's interconnected with finance, biodiversity, and impact. So to start off, I think it's important that we get into the Buckminster Fuller epistemology or worldview. So I'll put up a few quotes of his, and I'll read the first one, and then I'll read my favorite one. He talks about being a passenger on Spaceship Earth, which I completely agree with. He also talks about how to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without disadvantaging anyone or harming our ecological environment, which I think is a bold undertaking, but it's something we can do because, as they say, or if there's any, I think it's Star Trek, we have the technology. So it's a lot of pretty pictures in here, but we'll probably end up skipping past those. Ultimately, I want to start off by setting the context. When I say impact, what I mean. I primarily think about impact in this more integrated and integral way, and it's centered and is based around this premise defined by Robert Delner in his book, Integral Impact Investments. And it essentially emphasizes a holistic approach that integrates financial, social, and environmental impacts. A little nuance different than ESG, I would mostly highlight. And it's not to just generate financial returns, but also to positively affect humans and our environment. And it stresses the intentionality and measurable outcomes of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, which, to be frank, we're probably not going to achieve by 2030 unless we do some drastic changes. Aside from that, as we're talking about the Buckminster Fuller Institute, I'm sure people are thinking, what does Robert Delner have to do with this guy, Buckminster Fuller? They both really emphasize a multidimensional view of impact and recognize interconnectedness of all of these different economic, social, and environmental systems. And they mostly approach these things looking at them from a systems change and a systems lens, understanding that it's not just one factor, but all of these factors culminated together. So considering that, I think they would both agree that it's not just about the money, it's about making a difference in every breath that you take and every move and action that you make. More beautiful pictures. Aside from this, I talk about finance, but in this specific talk, we'll be talking more about climate finance, which a smarter guy than me at COP27 defined essentially as this transition to net zero economy, which meaning net zero carbon emissions, but taking in other dimensions and adapting our changing world. I agree. Obviously, there's a plethora of other things in our atmosphere we should be hyper cognizant of as well. Obviously, there's things like methane and other factors, but staying focused, reducing these greenhouse emissions and adapting climate impact crucial for low carbon and sustainable future. And the sources of funding are public, private, these alternative funding sources like bonds, crowdfunding, DAFs, et cetera. So how does these negatively and positively affect us? This is the guy whose quote I just used, which I also agree. We must build new financial mechanisms to help communities on the receiving end of these catastrophes. The positive effects are that these funds, well, first, the Nat Geo definition of biodiversity, which refers to a variety of living species, including plants, animals, bacteria, and fungi. There's a ton of positive effects of climate finance, such as funding projects that preserve forests, wetlands, oceans, specific habitats, specific species in certain habitats, enhancing resilience, adapting efforts, restoring mangroves, coral reefs, and other ways investing to support marine biodiversity, as well as integrated approaches like dual benefits for climate and biodiversity and protecting like tropical forests or rainforests, other things. But there's also negative effects as well, right? Like one of my ones that I've been noticing more and more is I love renewable energy and I think it's doing amazing work, but I think it's also important to note that wind turbines do produce harmful amounts of wind in areas that it did not exist before. It's been known to decimate certain bird populations in certain areas, which is some negative potentialities we should consider. Aside from this, though, I want to give you all some examples of some of the great work that we do that intersects these ideas. So, and I did want to go through and highlight and give tags to all of the people's pictures who we use, because I would love to give them more awareness. But in sense of time, I'll just provide a list, and if everybody wants to, I can send you their Instagrams and highlight them that way. So one of the things that we're doing right now is the bioregional resilience and regeneration aspect of our BFI Design Lab, which we launched this year under the new executive director, Dr. Stuart Cohen. And one of those things, I love like food forests and the people's backyards, but some of those projects, and that being a small one of them, are things like the Bioregional Scenarios Project, which is very similar to some of the things you all have seen here, where we're using leading tools, working with both for-profit and nonprofit companies and entities, that we pretty much model these scenarios to help them understand how they're affected in their local environment, and then translate that to the local communities versus just creating the science and keeping it in our own echo chamber and our own bubble. Another one that I'm very passionate about is large-scale ecological restoration. John Liu and his amazing film director had the pleasure of going to this essentially the nexus point of where China started their civilization, where they had created essentially a desert in the middle of their country. And across 20 years, they were able to reforest that deserted area, and I'll show a video of that shortly. As well as we've created bioregional funds where we have flow funding models where we essentially help reallocate resources into those local communities and allow them to get access to different ways of approaching permaculture, regenerative agriculture, and other tools that they can both not only implement but also be funded to apply. And our final one, and one of the ones that is near and dear to me because I'm an AI engineer, is Digital Gaia, where we pretty much use active inference to kind of anticipate and predict the end yields, soil health, carbon sequestration, and other climate resilience measures that smallholder farmers get access to. And we think it's a really cool way to kind of put the technology into application in the real world. Let's see if this video plays. And I can show you, this is John Liu's clip on large-scale ecosystem restoration. Oh. Or maybe not. It's okay. Pretty much the video just shows you the real world application of across 10 years, they took essentially a desert in the middle of China and turned it into a regreen forest, everything from flatlands to hills. It's a pretty amazing thing. You can kind of see the side by side despite the pixelation. Another one of our amazing projects, which will be spinning out into its own project at the end of the year, is Regenerosity, where we essentially teach both indigenous women, refugees, and children all the power of regenerative agriculture in their own local communities. And we've had massive success. We've been funded by Lush Cosmetics, and we won the Spring Prize from Lush Cosmetics and IKEA Foundation, and had the pleasure of being able to invest in more than a dozen projects and really help people drastically change their quality of living, going from eating one meal a day to multiple meals a day, including snacks, that are all healthy and nutrient-dense. And I had a video of that as well, but we'll just keep moving. But you can see some of the successes here. Another cool thing that we do at the Buckminster Fuller Institute is, because we're all cooperating on this spaceship Earth, one of Bucky's famous ideas, we wrote a cooperating manual for how we could all work and live on this planet more effectively together. And one of the things that we did, which I'm looking at Dr. Christopher Linden in hopes of revamping the next version of it, is created a manual for how we can better steward our oceans. And we called it our Blue Carbon chapter, as the ocean sequesters considerably more carbon than any forest on the planet by an order of magnitude. This is a little separate from BFI, but one of my favorite of my own investments is the Climate Foundation. I donate to them. I believe in their mission. They're a completely regenerative project in the Philippines, which is why I have on this barong, so that other people can see that, which is traditional Filipino wear for their own events. But essentially, they grow seaweed in a completely regenerative way without producing any waste, and it has a few amazing implications for improving biodiversity, food stability, and nutrient-dense foods. And this is an example of one of our rigs that we have built where we grow seaweed and sequester carbon during the day and let the seaweed experience photosynthesis while submerging it down to the ocean, or 100 meters or so, to uptake nutrients in the evening. And it helps us achieve more than 100% day-over-day growth of seaweed. And this is also a prize that, or in the large X Prize competition, to win the Grand X Prize, where we've already won $1 million, and we're hoping to win the Grand X Prize of $80 million doing this. And we are very excited about the large amount of carbon we can sequester in natural ways while producing foods that could be food for humans, and help, if we help chickens, which we make more chickens than we make any other animal on the planet, about 4 billion a year. While feeding them seaweed, we can reduce them taking more antibiotics than every human on the planet, because we use more antibiotics on chickens than humans, as well as it reduces carbon emissions from cows if we feed it to cows, a multitude of positive effects. With all that said, the main thing I want to leave you all with is a question. I'm a firm believer in this idea of axiology, which is essentially just the theory of value and studying how value is understood. I challenge us all, even though I'm an investor, I think about what I consider valuable all the time, and I would challenge us all to think about what we value beyond money. Although money is valuable, our impact is more valuable than money, and it leads me to this final point. Something I believe in more than money is stewardship and active ancestry, which I define as living for your forefathers or whoever. Even as a poor kid from Flint and somebody who's never met his dad, I know that I can live very happily if I pass away tomorrow, knowing I did what I could make positive impact on today. And I challenge you all to do the same. Thank you.